Shalom. We are in Exodus with our weekly Shabbat readings. We're up to the plagues that strike Egypt. My focus for you today is not so much on the plagues as much as how Pharaoh responds to them according to the Torah narrative. Observant readers find themselves with a major religious dilemma in this week's Sedra. In the 7th chapter, verse 3, right before the plagues begin, God tells Moses, Va'ani akshe et leiv paro, but I will harden Pharaoh's heart. V'herbeiti et ototai ve'et moftai be'eretz Mitzrayim, so that I may multiply my signs and my wonders in the land of Egypt. That sounds good, but the verse poses serious difficulties for the rabbis, for the scholars. Because if Pharaoh's heart is going to be hardened by God, and thus he's going to be forced to reject Moses' plea for the people after each and every plague, where is Pharaoh's free will? And how can he, and Egypt for that matter, be punished for actions that God is forcing him to do? Honestly, the various answers given are not as strong as the theological question raised. But I want to deal with that another time. It is true that the Torah does say that God will harden Pharaoh's heart. But it's also true that the text does not actually have that happening until plague number 6. If you look carefully for the first 5 plagues, the Torah reads, Vayechezak et leiv paro, and Pharaoh's heart hardened. In other words, Pharaoh did it to himself, at least for the first 5. That's a point that cannot be overstated. For as Pharaoh witnessed the conditions around him deteriorate, as his advisors, one by one, began to tell him, this is no accident, this is the finger of God, Pharaoh stopped himself from doing right, from changing what was happening. It wasn't God. Pharaoh, hardened his own heart. He wanted to change, but he wouldn't break the cycle of what he believed, what he felt. He had no choice but to do. I spoke of this during the high holidays. What Pharaoh was caught in is a situation that often holds us back each time. Pharaoh fell in love with his own narrative on life. He couldn't. He wouldn't change who he was. He wouldn't change how he viewed things, even when it was no longer a tenable position. Falling in love with his own narrative held him back, and honestly, holds us back each and every time. I mean, think about it. We leave doctors' offices after getting a health scare. We promise we will change our lifestyles. And then we go right back to unhealthy habits. We make incredibly boneheaded mistakes. And with utter sincerity, we pledge to change who we are. But we go right back to who we were and how we lived before. We promise on New Year's we are going to be better people, better friends, better parents, better children. By the end of this month, that resolution will be long forgotten. Human weakness. I don't think it's just that, though. I think we're like Pharaoh. We know what we need to do, but we harden ourselves each time to accept a narrative about ourselves. That narrative tells us this is who we really are. That's what we're always going to do. This is what we always have to believe. This is how we always have to respond. We harden our own hearts, and as a result, our narratives anchor us, freeze us, hold us back. But friends, there is nothing I can tell you that can be as life-changing in 2019 as realizing that we, not God, force ourselves in life to harden our hearts. And because of that narrative we develop, we end up not writing new stories for ourselves. We end up not writing better endings for ourselves. Just ask Pharaoh. So what's really stopping you from keeping your resolutions this year? What's holding you back in life? Maybe a false narrative that says, this is who you are and you'll never change. Wrong. You are never too old to change. You're never too old to learn. You're never too wise to feel you know everything. You're never too perfect to say, I am never wrong. You're never too hardened to say you can't move on. Not if you want to. But as we begin 2019, if you harden your heart, you keep listening to that same narrative you have created for yourself, you will never grow. You will never change. Let us remember the great quote by Viktor Frankl. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. Pharaoh could not. We can. Shabbat Shalom.